Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving right into a seriously interesting situation from the May 29th, 2026 special city council meeting in the Village of the Hills. This definitely wasn't your standard dry bureaucratic run-through. The council had to unpack the logistics, the price tag, and the surprisingly intense debate surrounding the big 250th anniversary fireworks display over at the local country club. It's an absolutely fascinating look at how local governments juggle public-private partnerships, long-standing traditions, and, of course, our taxpayer dollars.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the 2026 fireworks plan, look at safety and event logistics, unpack the city funding proposal, get into the big debate over taxpayer dollars, and wrap up with the sponsorship compromise.
Starting with Section 1, the 2026 fireworks plan, celebrating the big 250th anniversary.
To honor the nation's 250th, the club is going all out. The show's going to be about 5 minutes longer and feature a synchronized music track. They're actually stretching a single holiday into an entire week-long bash. But look at this schedule. The main fireworks are on Thursday, July 2nd. Kind of weird, right? Why not the actual 4th of July? Well, the club representative, Josh, dropped some practical truth on this. Closing down the golf course and driving range on a holiday weekend to set up carnival games, that would literally cause a revolt among the golfing members. Plus, there's no point trying to compete with the massive downtown shows on the 4th. So, Thursday it is, maximizing the fun without totally wrecking regular club operations.
Moving on to Section 2, safety and event logistics, or how to manage a massive crowd.
You know, when you've got well over 1,000 people swarming a golf course, you can't just light some fuses and hope for the best. It is a huge municipal undertaking. They've got a heavy-hitting 12-person security task force. Lakeway police, constables, private guards, the whole 9 yards. They're even ditching the golf carts and upgrading to these massive 60-person shuttle buses to move people around. But here's the kicker: mandatory wristbands. They are locking down those gates tight. If you don't have a wristband to prove you belong there, you are not getting in. And that strict access control, that actually tees up our next big topic.
Which brings us to Section 3, the city funding proposal, partnering for admission. All right, here is where things get real. The physical setup is handled, but who actually pays for it? The Parks and Recreation Commission unanimously recommended the city chip in exactly $6,000 for the fireworks. Okay, so why that specific number?
Well, for Parks and Rec, this looked like the deal of the century. That $6,000 basically acts as a giant admissions subsidy. It means Hills residents get in absolutely free. Meanwhile, the club is footing the rest of the bill, which is estimated to be around $54,000, pushing the total event cost to roughly $60,000. So from the city's perspective, securing a $60,000 extravaganza for a $6,000 investment, that seems like a total win-win on paper, right?
But wait, let's look at Section 4, debating taxpayer dollars and the council's dilemma.
Now, whenever public tax dollars are on the line, people rightfully start asking tough questions. And man, this council meeting really got into it. On one hand, yes, paying the $6,000 saves residents about $10 to $15 per family at the door, and it keeps things super friendly between the city and the club. But on the flip side, there were some very real taxpayer concerns. It came out that the club had just hiked their social dues by 7%, and overall club dues shot up by roughly 10%. The argument here is totally valid. If the club is pulling in all this extra internal revenue, shouldn't they easily be able to absorb a $6,000 shortfall without asking the city for a handout?
One council member perfectly captured this exact frustration. Listen to this quote. They pointed out that residents are already paying these higher monthly dues directly out of pocket, so turning around and using their tax dollars to fund the exact same club's event, it feels like they're being double charged. It really makes you do the math, calculating the break-even point of how many families actually need to show up to even justify the city spending that $6,000 in the first place.
But then Josh, the club representative, jumps in and completely shifts the narrative. He clarified that actually the club never even asked for this money. The whole proposal originated from the city's Parks and Rec department. Josh was just like, look, if you don't want to contribute, that's perfectly fine. We'll pay for it ourselves. They'd simply go back to charging folks $10 or $15 at the gate. For the club, this wasn't about squeezing the city for cash at all. It was purely about the optics of being a good neighbor partner with the city.
So how did they resolve this? That's Section 5, the sponsorship compromise, a new funding path.
So the council is stuck. They genuinely want to support this awesome community tradition, but they are seriously and rightfully hesitant to just hand over tax dollars, especially given those recent club dues hikes. Enter a council member named Kevin, who pitches a really clever, pragmatic third option.
They agree to formally approve the $6,000, just to make sure the event planning doesn't hit a brick wall. But, and this is a huge but, they added a strict mandate. The city has to actively hunt down third-party corporate sponsors to offset that exact cost. Boom. Residents still get in for free, the club gets its partner, and the taxpayers don't take the hit.
And they didn't just leave it as some abstract pipe dream either. Right there in the meeting, they started throwing out actual names. They brought up Leif Johnson Ford, a local dealership with a huge track record of giving back. They recently dropped 50 grand on an education foundation. The logic makes total sense. What local business wouldn't want premium, exclusive branding at a massive 250th anniversary blowout?
The motion ended up passing with just one abstention, so the fireworks are officially a go. But honestly, it leaves us with such a compelling question. As local municipal budgets everywhere tighten their belts, is this the ultimate playbook? Are corporate sponsorships going to become the new gold standard for keeping our neighborhood traditions alive without ever having to hike up our taxes? It's a brilliant workaround, and definitely a model to keep an eye on. All right, that wraps up our explainer for today. I hope this gave you a cool look at the gears turning behind your local community events. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you next time.